This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify POS has everything you need to sell in person. Go to shopify.com/system, all lowercase, to take your retail business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/system.
Good song.
Absolutely.
Tom Petty, Learning to Fly, 101.5 K-Rock. What's up? It's the Fort.
Nice.
That's coming up at 7 o'clock on our sisters. Actually, 8 o'clock, because we have the Chris Kleiman Show.
We do.
On K-Rock.
You act like you've done that before, though. What a concept.
K-Rock was my...
yeah, I know.
That was my first time being on air, was on K-Rock. I've been on K-Rock longer than I have on K-Man. I was hired to be a board operator, board op, and then or an engineer, board engineer. And I was like, hey, Sean Rock, I would love to be on K-Rock. It's been my dream. I've listened to this station all my life. Nobody here knows K-Rock like I do, knows the music like I do. She's like, is that a threat? I was like, no, I just want to do weekends. I just want a Saturday here and there.
Well played.
And then I got the night job, or the night job, the 7 to 12 is the night slot in October of 2012. And I've been on K-Rock consistently ever since. And I've been on here on this show for 10 years. We're back on the game. Mitch Fortner and Troy Coverdale, just us two rocking it. It's the game after work. Talk some wide receivers here in just a moment. Looking at a couple of things here. BYU, this is a good tweet here from Mitch Harper. Mitch_Harper. He's a BYU insider. He hosts the Power Cat Game Day for BYU. He does their extended pregame show like I do, hosting Power Cat Game Day. You'll hear at 5:30. The Saturday evening, this Saturday, as Cats visit BYU for a 9:30 kickoff. Robert Lipson, if he's listening right now, he's going to kill me because I'm not using military time. 21:30 o'clock, as he likes to say. Very interesting. BYU since 1984 has been a 6-point or more home underdog 19 times. And since the turn of the century, 12 of those games, BYU at home has been a 6 or more point dog, home dog. Last win as a 6-point plus underdog at home was against Utah in 2021. Before that was Boise State in 19. And the other win this century, Texas in 2013 at LaVell Edwards Stadium. BYU, as K-State is a 6.5-point favorite, a 6-point or more dog at home is 3-9 this century. Also, speaking of Power Cat Game Day, I'm going to ask this question. This is more of an ask us anything type of question. I'm going to ask it now because I know the answer for Troy. And if you have an answer as well, text us, 785-537-1350. Text line is absolutely open. Plus, if you want to give your 2 cents about K-State at BYU on Saturday or any questions or comments, feel free to text us. Again, the number is 785-537-1350. BYU, of course, is a Mormon school, Latter-day Saints. And they have an honor code at BYU. And it lists a bunch of things you should, not do. It's not necessarily a concrete rule. You absolutely cannot do this. Some things are, some things aren't. It's just frowned upon, and you may get people mad at you. But in this, this is going to be a start bench cut on Power Cat Game Day on Saturday. The honor code rules you would struggle with the most, and the 3 I'm going to list are no caffeine, clean shaven, and no cussing. I know exactly what my list is. Mine is, the biggest struggle for me would be clean shaven because I like to rock the 5 o'clock show. Right now it's a little long, but when I travel to Hayes on Friday, it'll be just the real short stubble. That's the look I like to go with. 2 would be the cussing. I don't cuss a whole lot on air, and I don't cuss as much as I used to, but I like to throw a word out there once in a while. Especially when the Cats play on the road, I may say a word or two. But The one I definitely wouldn't struggle with is caffeine. I haven't had any since I was 18 years old.
Oh,
And I'm 34 now. So caffeine would not be an issue. I know for Troy what the issue would be.
Oh, yeah. Caffeine is right at the top of the list.
It's the reason why he's not going to the game.
Right.
They're not going to have Diet Coke. He's not going to be able to find it in a 10-mile radius.
Actually, I do have it on good authority from a previous guest on this show, by the way.
You got a guy?
Yeah, Bill Riley at Utah did inform me that they do have soda in the press box nowadays.
Oh. Yeah, they keep it away from the gotta be careful. The LDS.
Correct.
They prefer to go by LDS, Latter-day Saints. So they just keep it from the regular population in the media, since there's probably
Essentially, they got tired of hearing the complaints.
like no coffee. They get their sugar highs. There's no highs on anything else.
And it's interesting because there still are a plenty of coffee shops in Utah.
Actually, and I still think like candy, like sugar and stuff, that's also kind of a no-no as well. They're really healthy people.
Yes, they are.
The cougar tail is the exception, I guess. I was watching. I did Mitch Harper's podcast yesterday, just previewing K-State. Cool to be on that show and talk Cats for a few minutes to preview the game. And I was telling him that I was watching a documentary on YouTube. It's like an hour and a half long. It's this guy that goes around just Provo and BYU, and there is the guy just talking about what they believe in and why they do this, and this, and how they live and how it's just different from most people. But, like, crime rate is super low there. Health, like obesity is super low. They're pretty disciplined people. But one thing they do have is soda shops. Soda shops is a pretty big deal there. And that was like a big part of their whole thing. Like, yeah, this is like our little, you don't have to get caffeine. You can get caffeine. You have like thousands of different varieties you can go with. It's like kind of an old school thing.
So, true story from, and this is a case where we did not play, when I was with Northern Colorado, we did not play BYU at any point. But Utah Valley, which at the time was transitioning from junior college to Division I, is in Orem, so not very far from Provo. And it's an eye-opener when about the only place that you can find a beer is Applebee's.
Mitch told me they have two places. They have two bars.
Yes.
Like actually like around BYU. There are two bars, and there was you may remember this. I remember this being a story one time. I've heard stories as well of K-State fans going to certain locations, and they, like when Power Kid Game Day was on the road, and they would go to a particular bar, and K-State fans would drink that place dry, a Bud Light or something, just as an example. I've heard a couple of stories of that. But there's a famous story of one time, I think this was 2016 or 17, Wisconsin was playing at LaVell Edwards Stadium, and they had just the two bars, and those two bars had the best weekend in its history. It's the reason they're still in business.
Yes.
And that's because Wisconsin fans drank those two bars absolutely dry, and they were not ready for that wave of red to come through Provo and drink all the booze.
The other thing that you have to adjust for in other locales in Utah is it's still liquor by the drink. You have to get a club card if you're going to go into the bar to drink.
Oh, did not know about that.
Something that we used to have in this state.
Mitch Harper will be joining us tomorrow's show, so he'll break it down a little bit more for you. He says there actually is, not to give too much, because obviously we recorded it yesterday, but something about there's like a designated spot for tailgating there, and you could probably get away with a drink or two there. So he'll give you those details tomorrow afternoon in the 4 o'clock hour. I did want to touch on the wide receivers here for just a moment. Just somebody asked me about this earlier this week and about, why have we not seen Dante Cephas and Garrett Oakley and Trey Spivey and, like Jaden Jackson, why are they not taking off yet? The wide receiver thing is very interesting because that was a very hyped thing about this team without actually seeing some of it in action, like a Dante Cephas, like a Sterling Lockett, where we've only seen him return a punt. He's been on the field, but the ball's not going in his direction. It's been a tight end show so far, but it's not like huge numbers or anything. Decent averages, like for a Braden Lofton who has 14 yards a catch, but it's the scoring touchdowns. Let me ask you this. What are you more surprised about so far through 3 games? That a wide receiver doesn't have a touchdown, or that Avery Johnson doesn't have any rushing touchdowns yet?
Ooh. I am more surprised that Avery Johnson doesn't have a rushing touchdown yet.
I'm surprised that he hasn't broke one for a long touchdown yet. I'm actually more surprised he was the guy to do the quarterback. He did a quarterback sneak on that 4th and 1 on that first drive. I thought it was going to a running back for sure, or a tight end or whatever. I wasn't expecting him. He don't want to get him too banged up out there. You know what I mean?
Right.
Taking the big hits or whatever. The numbers are surprisingly low so far. I mean, heck, before the Arizona game, we still hadn't seen Avery throw it around much in his career yet. He had just as many throws as he had rushes. Rushes himself. The numbers were almost straight on. Right now, Jace Brown has been the best receiver. There's no doubt about that. 48-yard catch and run against Arizona. He has 148 yards, 9 catches, and that's the thing I've noticed so far. Outside of Jace, nobody has more than 100 yards receiving. Nobody's in double-digit catches yet. And I'm surprised that Dante Cephas, Jaden Jackson, and Garrett Oakley each just have 1 catch. Garrett got hurt in the Arizona game. He came out in, I think, that second drive, and we didn't see him for the rest of the game and should be good to go for the game against BYU. But a spark has to come from somewhere. Now, I think Avery's been doing his job much better. I think his passing is much more accurate, especially when he's on the run. He's going through his progressions, but are the wide receivers also doing their jobs? I think maybe yes and no, but I think we've noticed more it was just Dante Cephas making a couple of mistakes, and now he's behind the 8 ball. Now, we're like, when is he going to break out? When is he going to do something? I think Dante's done a good job, and I think this is the same for most of the wide receivers. I think they're doing the right things. I just don't have the answer as to why the ball's maybe not going in more of their direction. But at the same time, there's a lot of mouths to feed. A lot of the time, you're going to see Dylan Edwards and DJ Giddens on the field at the same time. Multiple tight ends. So I'm not freaking out or anything about the wide receivers not exactly taking off yet and having, establishing themselves as a really core group, and the depth is where it was hyped to be. Jace is clearly the number 1 target. He has the most targets and the most receptions, the most yards. Nobody's scored a touchdown yet. But I wonder, what can K-State do to maybe try to shake things up and get things going a little bit? I like seeing Trey Spivey playing a little bit more. I don't think BYU is going to be necessarily the game that somebody has a breakout game. I think Oklahoma State honestly could be that, because Oklahoma State has not been good against the pass so far this year. But I've seen a little bit of Trey Spivey that I'm like, I think this guy has some just natural ability to go be a good wide receiver, just not getting a whole lot of targets. 5 catches, 41 yards, and no touchdowns. He does have a 22-yard catch against UT Martin, but I like how he blocks. I think he runs routes very well. He's just not through the progressions where the ball is going his way so far. I think there's still some trust also being developed, and I think that could be a major key, where Avery and the coaches are still developing that trust in the wide receivers. I mean, even Dante Cephas, who had that drop and then the miscommunication on the next route, he still made a really nice catch in that game, but he still just has the 1 catch on the year. It's just a lack of production. But I wonder where Trey Spivey goes from here, because he had his most plays against Arizona this season so far in 18, but just the 1 target. I'm just kind of thinking out loud here. I'm thinking maybe Trey Spivey is going to get a little bit more attention. He's getting more playing time as the season has gone along. Not getting as much attention from Avery, but he's doing some really nice things. And by the way, he's tall. He's by far the tallest receiver that K-State has at 6'4". He's got that Tetaroa McMillan size. I don't know if he has all the speed in the world, but I think he's pretty fast. He's not too bad. Maybe that could be blossoming here over the next couple of weeks. I'm just saying something that's something to pay attention to. Watch Trey Spivey, the redshirt freshman against BYU and into the game against Oklahoma State. I think his name is going to start to get called more. I think that could be a nice spark for the offense. But I hope the wide receivers can be more involved, and the ball's going to still be spread out. I don't think you're going to see anybody over 700 yards receiving this year.
Right.
It's just not that kind of group. It's not that kind of a guy that's way ahead and separating himself from the group. There's just a whole lot of mouths to feed, and plus with that rotation, they're rotating guys in. So the attention, you already got to earn it when you're on the field. But when you're rotating in and out, maybe not as many opportunities. But I think Trey Spivey's doing some nice things despite just having 5 catches for 41 yards. But right now the attention it's just been too easy to the tight ends. Because Braden Lofton and Will Swanson are running some nice routes on the run fake. Will's been wide open once in that Arizona game, made a really nice catch in the Tulane game for a touchdown. Mm-hmm. And Braden Lofton is running some very nice routes. He may be, right now, the best route runner for K-State right now without making an adjustment and coming back or making an adjustment on the route on the first read to get open. He's just naturally running some really nice routes, and maybe the defense just aren't accounting for him right now. But what the run fake, and this was mentioned during the press conferences, have been really nice, and they've been running some nice routes, and they've been open. So credit to the tight ends. I am very surprised that they have 4 touchdowns. There are none to Garrett Oakley, and the wide receivers don't have any touchdowns yet. So, but I am surprised Dante Cephas has just 1 catch for 9 yards. He's back with Matthew Middleton, who was his wide receiver coach at Kent State, where he had over 1,000 yards receiving one season. Keegan Johnson has shown glimpses of, honestly, maybe it's just been more of glimpses. He's made some really nice plays so far. It's just not the most catches and yards in the world yet. But Avery's going to continue to spread the football out. I'm just saying give it some time because those relationships are still developing in game. There's one thing to do it in practice against your own team. There's another thing when you do it in game and prove to the coaches and to Avery that you're going to go out and make some plays. And you deserve to get the ball more. That is still the work in progress.
And in all honesty, let's face it, this is also a quarterback who is still a work in progress. This is a sophomore who is learning the game literally as it presents itself. He's not getting an opportunity to be on the sideline and just watch the way that a normal sophomore quarterback tends to be. This is his ship to drive, but it does take some learning as you go, and I think that there's still some of those growing pains that are in play.
I would like to see K-State, and I can't tell you how, when he had his 18 snaps against Arizona, how many of the first-string guys was he out there with, or was it just a shift change and he was with the second string because he's the backup, actually, to Dante Cephas. I would like to see Trey Spivey out there with Keegan and with Jace and see what that group can do together. Because Trey won't be accounted for as like they would for Keegan and Jace. Mm-hmm. So there might be something there. Let's take a break. I actually got to get out of here. I'm heading up to Manhattan High School. Troy is taking over, so don't go anywhere. More of the game is coming up next. Go Cats.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify POS has everything you need to sell in person. Go to shopify.com/system, all lowercase, to take your retail business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/system.
The game continues on News Radio KMAN. Troy Coverdale in solo here for the final half hour-ish of the show ahead of Royals baseball tonight. I'll touch on the MLB in just a moment because we are getting closer to the end of the regular season and the playoffs looming. But do want to note that today the Pro Football Hall of Fame was out with its list of candidates for next year's class. 167, quote-unquote, modern era candidates were on the list today. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the reminder that we all are getting older. K-State running back Darren Sproles is on the list. The former Philadelphia Eagle et al. Yeah. You want to feel old? We've got a K-Stater on the Pro Football Hall of Fame potential inductees next year. I mean, long way to go till we get to that point, but he's on that list. Holy smokes. So, I had a flashback when I heard about this morning because I was brought to remember a game that took place years ago out at Twin Oaks on one of the softball fields. And at the time, I'm playing co-rec softball, ironically in a league with a team that was based out of this building as an opponent. They weren't our opponent that night, but there was a game where things are happening quickly, and I'm playing catcher. An opponent comes sliding in to home. I've got on my standard softball cleats, and we have a bang-bang play at the plate. I lay down the tag, feel something just pop in my big toe. Don't think much about it until the umpire calls the runner safe. Well, I had the perfect way to show the umpire that the runner wasn't safe. He had poked a hole through my big toenail with his cleat. He never touched home. No, he touched my cleat. Touched my foot. Man, it took me months to get that toenail cleaned up. The Astros and Padres last night wound up with a situation where Jose Altuve got himself thrown out of the game in frustration. 2 outs in the ninth inning. Game is tied at 3. He comes to bat against the Padres closer, Robert Suarez. Altuve fouled a ball off his foot on a 1-1 count. The ball dribbled down the line to third baseman Manny Machado, and the umpires ruled it a live ball in play. Altuve was so angry that he took his shoe and sock off to show the umpires where the ball hit his foot. He was thrown. I mean, seriously. You're going to get thrown because they view that as you showing them up. And of course, it's not a reviewable play. Cannot be looked at by instant replay. So Altuve gets thrown out of the game, and it was an inning-ending ground out, thus prompting the game to continue on. San Diego could have moved to just 2.5 out of first place with a win in that game. The Astros, meanwhile, continue to be in the mix atop the AL West as they sit 5 clear of the Mariners now, who have had a very unusual year in terms of strong start, faded, rallied after firing their manager, and have now faded again. The defending world champions are a full 10 games out, by the way, in the Rangers, so they don't even have a chance at making the playoff field. But the Astros right now are 5 clear of the Mariners in the AL West and look to be headed to being able to take the number 3 spot in the playoffs here in the next couple of weeks. And this is the key thing to remember. Even with the Royals losing last night, they remain in very good position right now in that they are still 3 games ahead of Detroit for the final playoff spot. Detroit sits a game and a half back of the Twins for that 6th and final American League playoff spot. The Royals are a game and a half ahead of the Twins in the number 5 spot. The Yankees, by 1 game, have the top record in the league. The Guardians then follow. Those are your teams atop the East and the Central. But the Central right now is looking like it could land 3 teams in the playoffs, because you're looking at 2 of the wild card teams likely coming from the Central, given the traffic right now between the Royals, Twins, and Tigers. It would be nice tonight if the Royals are able to help themselves again. But last night, they still sit 5 back of the Guardians. They were helped by the Guardians getting a win against the Twins. And that's where this is playing out down the stretch, is that you've got this matchup that continues tonight with the Guardians and Twins and the Royals and Tigers. Next week becomes interesting for the Royals in that you are looking at 2 teams that are not, well, one of them specifically that is not in the mix at all for a playoff spot when you go to Washington. And then you have the Braves, who could be eliminated from the playoffs by the time that the Royals get to Atlanta to close out the regular season next weekend. Kansas City wraps up that series with Detroit tonight. They'll have tomorrow night off and then close the homestand against San Francisco. And the Giants come in a non-factor in the playoff race. So you have right now 2 of 3 teams that are still ahead of the Royals on their schedule over these next 10 days. 2 of those 3 teams are just playing out the string at this point, and Atlanta could be in that position by the time that Kansas City gets there. The Brewers earlier today clinched the National League Central. They did it by being 10.5 games clear of the Cubs, 87-64. The Phillies are 8 games up on the Mets in the National League East, so they're dominating there. And the Dodgers, surprisingly, are a part of what is the closest race, and that is the NL West, where the Dodgers hold a 3.5 game edge on the Padres, and then the Diamondbacks are still in the mix potentially for a wild card, as they're 5.5 back after playing in the World Series last year. So you could wind up there with the NL West landing 3 teams in the playoff mix when the regular season comes to an end. One of the things to note, this is going to be a rare season in which no team wins 100 games in the regular season. The likelihood, anyway, is there. The Phillies would be the only one that could get to that point. They're 91-60, so they would have to win 9 games over the rest of the season to get there. And they are, well, they suffered the loss today to the Brewers, so that immediately knocks one more off of the list that they could have going into this final stretch of the season. Let's just get a look here at the schedule for them, because it could very well be that they find themselves with literally 9 games remaining. Mets. So 4 against the Mets, 3 against the Cubs, and they'll close out with 3 against the Nationals. So to win 9 games, they have 10 games to play. Not very likely that the Phillies are going to hit the 100 mark, which means that the league will not have a 100-game winner in the regular season. The American League has no chance. Not with the Yankees at 88 wins and the Guardians at 87, and those are your best teams. The White Sox, on the flip side of it, have lost 116 games. 116. And the run differential is unbelievable. The Rockies are about as bad, for crying out loud. And they've lost 94 games. The run differential for the White Sox this season, they have been outscored by 312 runs. For the entire season. 312. The Marlins have been outscored nearly by 200 runs. The Rockies have been outscored by 223 runs, and they lost again today to the Braves. They gave up 6 runs early, and that was all she wrote. Yeah, they have the fun aspect of going out to Chavez Ravine this weekend to play the Dodgers. Painful franchise right now. There are 4 teams that have allowed more than 100 runs more to their opponents than they have scored. The Marlins, the Angels at 133, the Rockies, and the woeful Red Sox, who are setting a record for futility. 36 wins this year. They have not even won 24% of their games, and they are 51 games out of first place in the AL Central. What? I mean, that is just a dumpster fire. That is just literally a dumpster fire. And their offseason will be maybe the most interesting one to watch. Because I don't know what changes there. I don't know how you go about changing it. Other than starting in the front office, but that's easier said than done. Good grief. So again, the Royals, Tigers, our coverage coming up at the top of the hour. First pitch is at 6:40 tonight as Kansas City tries to salvage the finale of this 3-game set before taking the day off tomorrow and getting set to close out the homestand against San Francisco over the weekend. We continue on the game with more in a moment. The game continuing on a Wednesday afternoon. I'm Troy Coverdale. Mitch Fortner off taking care of some of his Manhattan High duties. A.J. Shaw out this afternoon. Bit under the weather. So you get stuck with me for, about a half an hour, but the time is ticking away. Last week on Wildcat Insider, or it was 2 weeks ago, I can't remember for sure, but there was discussion with K-State Athletic Director Gene Taylor about the College Football Playoff Committee going through and doing some mock drafts, if you will, of what a 12-team playoff field would look like. The Associated Press had a reporter that was embedded with them through some of this couple of weeks ago in Grapevine, Texas. So just outside of Dallas. As they put together their bracket from last year, you saw Liberty pick up what essentially was the number 12 seed. And as they laid out what would have been a 1 through 5, yes, Florida State would have been in that mix. And in fact, they would have been the number 3 team and have a bye. Remember, they were left out of the final mix last year in the field of 4. And I love the irony of this, as this bracket from last year, if it had been a 12-team playoff, again, this is this mock draft that the folks involved with last year's CFP and some of the folks involved with this year were going over. Florida State would have had a shot of playing Alabama in the Peach Bowl. Of course, Bama having gotten into the 14 field last year by virtue of winning the SEC championship game. So the bracket would have fallen out this way. Oregon would have opened at Ohio State, 9 versus 8. Liberty would have been the highest group of 5 team ranked and made the field. They would have opened at number 5, Michigan. Someone just hit the brakes right there. Yes, the team that went on to win the national championship last year, if the bracket had been 12 teams, would have been at number 5. Missouri would have gone in at number 10. They would have taken on number 7 Georgia. And then Alabama, as the number 6 seed, would have faced number 11 Penn State in Tuscaloosa. Winners advance, and it would break down this way. So Oregon-Ohio State winner would get Washington at the Rose Bowl. Washington was the number 1 team in this bracket. This one surprises me. Really surprises me. The Liberty-Michigan winner would have advanced to the Fiesta Bowl where they would have played number 4 seed Arizona. Texas would have been the number 2 seed in the Sugar Bowl and gotten either Missouri or Georgia. And then you have that Penn State-Alabama winner advancing to take on number 3 seed Florida State in the Peach Bowl. With the contractual agreement still in place for conferences, they're still there for the quarterfinal round, which is why Washington would have been in the Rose Bowl. Texas would have been in the Sugar. Well, now, this year, essentially, because they are SEC. And from there, things would have fallen out. But Florida State would have had a first-round bye. Alabama would have to play their way in. Beyond that, beyond the first round. Arizona would have been a first-round bye, while Michigan would have been the number 5 seed and have to play in the opening round. It is amazing to see this breakdown from last year in what it means for the 12-team field going forward. And already some noise is being made about, do we see a 6-team SEC contingent make this year's 12-team field? No. Please, dear God, no. It's unbelievable how the AP has set this up already. And the coaches, for that matter, too. But no. Just can't. It can't happen. That would be one of the worst things to happen in the first year of the 12-team playoff. Just awful. Anyway, but the point being is it is just very intriguing to go back and look and see how this breaks down and how it would have played out if you were going by the current conference affiliations and expanding the field to 12. Such a different look than what things ended up last year. We'll wrap the game in a moment. Tomorrow night, NFL coverage for you beginning at 6:30. The Patriots and the Jets tomorrow night, Thursday Night Football. Kickoff is after 7 o'clock. You can hear it right here on News Radio KMAN. The game, of course, back at it tomorrow. Another edition in front of us, including Mitch's conversation with BYU contributor Mitch Harper. That tomorrow afternoon here on The Game. I'll catch you tomorrow morning bright and early for another edition of K-Man's Morning News. Till then, game over.